Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hi, welcome to the June 7th edition of Basis Loaded with Joe Schmit. I am Joe Schmit, and this episode, as always, is produced by Paige Driscoll. What we do here is break down the latest NDPSR report. Let's start this week with butter. This butter number coming in at 248.19 represents a plus 5 to the CME 1-week average of 243.45. We traded 6 loads on the CME, so light volume there and not a lot to pull that basis down. Plus 5 is higher than our expected basis, so that is a really nice price for the manufacturer. However, at that elevated basis, the volume just barely over 2.1 million pounds. So higher than expected basis, the manufacturer was able to call a high price, but it looks like end users kind of turned their noses up at that elevated level, taking only the minimum, well short of our expected 3.5 million pounds, which in the end puts the producer back by some 1.4 million pounds this week. Moving on to the world of cheese in blocks, possibly the biggest surprise on this report, 162.72. That's a plus 11.5 to the CME 1-week average of 151 even. We traded 25 loads on the CME last week. That volume did little to pull that basis down. 11.5 is well over our expected basis. And the benchmark CME week that we use is 151. We were down from 160 the prior week. So down 9 cents on the CME, only 2.5 cents of that break gets into the NDPSR. And after going from 160 to 151, we rally up to 156 next week. So it was a short-lived low down there at that 151 area, and you would expect higher than normal basis, but I don't think anybody was looking for 11.5 over. That is higher than expected. As I mentioned, we traded 1 million pounds on the CME last week, so typically you can add that to the expected 12.5 million. I would have expected that this week's block volume on the NDPSR would have been in the 13.5 million pound neighborhood, but we are well short of that, well short of even our expected benchmark. If you take out all that weight that we moved at the exchange last week, short of 11.9 million pounds. So again, similar to butter, we have a really nice price here, higher than expected basis, significantly higher than an expected basis. However, at that elevated level, once again, buyers taking the minimum, turning up their nose a little bit at the higher than expected price, and the weight just didn't move as shown here on the NDPSR. Next up, in the barrels, 153.15. That's a plus 5 to the CME 2-week average of 148.25. Higher than expected volume here in the barrel, coming in north of our expected 13.5, but we did trade 35 loads on the CME, which equates to 1.4 million pounds. So if you take the expected contract of 13.5, you add in the 1.5 that we traded on the exchange last week, you would expect this number to be up in the 15-ish neighborhood. Didn't get there this week. So lower than expected volume and basis right in the middle of our expected 4 to 6 over. Even with all that weight trading on the exchange, that's a nice price relative to the CME 2-week average. Whey, 33.54. That represents a plus 5 to the CME 1-week average of 28.45. Of course, we are always looking at prior week's NDPSR when it comes to the whey world. Last week, the prior week's NDPSR was, let's call it that May 20th number of 38 cents. So they took 4.5 cents off of the prior week's NDPSR to move almost 5.8 million pounds on the NDPSR this week. Now that 5.8 includes 1.5 million that we traded at the CME. Last week's CME average was 26.50. So if you take 2 cents off for the freight allowance, you're talking about 1.5 million pounds going in at 24.50, and then another 4.2 million pounds going in at 38. And that's how you get close to this 33.54, which is down only slightly from last week's NDPSR, but off big from the prior week's NDPSR. And of course, going forward now with contracts based off prior week's NDPSR, instead of working off of that high 30s level, now we're going to be working off a 33 to 34 cent prior week's NDPSR level. So then when you throw in all the weight that we're trading at the CME in the 26 neighborhood, we could be approaching that 30 cent threshold shortly. And then lastly, non-fat 115.49. That's a minus a half to the CME 1 week average of 116. We traded 6 loads on the CME last week, so not a lot to talk about there. Good volume here on the NDPSR, north of 21 million pounds. So lower than expected basis in non-fat. However, all in all, I think you would have to call it a win for the manufacturer, as they were able to move north of 21 million pounds here at the lows for the year on the CME. So it is now June pricing. Summer is upon us. This is week 1 of 4 for the June pricing cycle. And if you carry current CME prices out through the remainder of the 4-week June pricing cycle, currently getting a June class 3 of 1520 and a June class 4 of 1810. If you take today's prices and carry it forward through the entire 5-week July pricing cycle, currently getting a July class 3 expiration of 1550 and a July class 4 of 1785. So we saw some gains on the CME today. 1550 is well below where the July to Sep futures curve currently resides. So it looks like futures trader are expecting the gains that we saw today at the CME to continue in the weeks to come. We'll see. Only the future will tell. This is the last basis loaded prior to us taking a 2-week summer holiday. So by the time we speak next, we'll be wrapping up June for the 4th week of pricing. Until then, on behalf of Paige Driscoll and the entire EverAg team, thanks so much. See ya at the end of June. Bye-bye.